Joining us now on the line is David Martosko, a U.S. political editor for the Daily Mail, and it's good to have you, David. We always like to check in and keep up with what's going on in the 2016 race. Let's turn, if we could, to this event that occurred yesterday. Donald Trump at Liberty University, a religious institution, religious school, where he's talking about the Bible, and he makes a reference to a certain book of the Bible.
2 Corinthians, right? 2 Corinthians 3:17. That's the whole ball game.
Well, most people who've been to a Bible study now and then probably refer to that as 2 Corinthians.
So 2 Corinthians go into a bar. And
I kind of wonder if Donald Trump now supports the 2 amendments as well.
I mean, that'd be like saying the 2 letter to the church at Corinth from the Apostle Paul. Well, anyway, I mean, but I mean, does this kind of thing? Look, it's a laughable moment. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. But he goes to a religious university and he talks about 2 Corinthians. Doesn't that make him seem inauthentic?
Oh, just a little, you think? No, I mean, look, the bigger question here is whether or not the evangelicals at Liberty University hold it against him. From my read and from folks I talked to who were there, the kids there were laughing with him. They weren't laughing against him or at him. And in fact, he won them over 4 or 5 seconds later.
Yeah.
So I think one of Marco Rubio's guys, one of his faith-based communicators, tweeted, it won't matter. Nothing ever matters.
Well, and listen, Rubio is wise to stay away from this, but I think that there's a larger question here, David, in terms of that verse. The 2 Corinthians 3:17 is, now the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. That speaks to a block of voters right now who see the United States government firmly founded in Judeo-Christian principles. And these voters make a difference in Iowa, in Virginia, where the Donald was, in South Carolina. And Trump, by doing this, clearly is trying to get those voters because they're with Cruz right now, right?
Well, that's true. They are. And remember, Cruz announced his very candidacy on that same stage.
Yes.
This is not an accident at all. And the bigger question for Trump is whether or not people on the Christian right want to embrace him, even though they understand he's not a Bible thumper from the Deep South. They get that. They're not stupid. But is it enough for them that they would have somebody in the White House in Trump who swears up and down he would defend their traditional Christian values, and that he understands that the church is under assault? At least that's what they think. Is that enough, or do they really want one of their own in the Oval Office? That's the question for these evangelicals in Iowa, and there are an awful lot of them.
All right, so let's talk about Iowa right now. Where are things shaping? How are things shaping up there? It's a battle between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, and they've taken the gloves off against one another.
Well, yeah, the bromance is totally over. The question now that we're just a handful of days away from the Iowa caucuses, I think we're like 13 days away now, it's about ground game and organizing. I mean, the polls are one thing, and everybody can, tell a pollster, sure, I plan to caucus for Donald Trump or I plan to caucus for Ted Cruz. But on a snowy night in early February, will you get your butt out there and actually show up and do it? That's the hard question. And for my money, if it is smart money, I don't know, we'll find out pretty soon. I think the Trump factor is that he's motivated people who have never shown up to a caucus before, who have never, he's going to bring 10 to 15,000 people out there who have never done this before, and those are the folks who don't know how hard it is. They don't know how long it is, how you have to stand there with a cup of coffee in your hand for 2.5 hours while it's freezing cold. Either those folks are going to be so excited about the novelty of it, like a kid at Disney World for the first time, that they'll do it anyway, or they're going to get 5 steps out their door and say, I'm just going to stay home. And that'll be really what tells the story.
So, David, when things are close like this in a state like Iowa, television ads sometimes can make a difference. I remember in 2004, part of Kerry's resurgence was that loan he took from himself, remember, to buy television time. And we're learning now through the Associated Press that Ted Cruz's super PAC has now purchased $2.5 million here in these final couple of weeks, which catapults apparently the ad buy for Cruz to the number 1 slot in that state. Do you think that could help embolden and organize those caucus goers for Cruz?
Honestly, no, and here's why. Television buys are appealing to an increasingly older demographic. Folks in their 18 to 25 demo and maybe even up to 30 don't pay attention to TV ads. They're streaming their television on a stick from Google, and they're looking at the Internet. And those ads are free, and everybody's been running them since forever. So the question is, who's going to show up as a result of a TV ad? I mean, you may as well be showing it on reruns of The Golden Girls or Matlock, you know? That's who you're targeting. And those folks are very, very hard to motivate. Those are not, you know, in a lot of cases, if they are your first-time caucus goers, those are the Trump people. Those are not the Cruz folks. So Cruz blowing that kind of money on actual old terrestrial broadcast TV or cable, I think it's, you know, bad money.
All right, what about the other side of the equation, the Democrats? I mean, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, how's that shaping up in Iowa?
Well, Bernie is gaining momentum. Definitely, unless Hillary does something to turn this around, she's going to lose both Iowa and New Hampshire. I mean, if both of those races were tomorrow, I think she would lose them both. It would be a squeaker in Iowa, but New Hampshire's going to be a laugher. Bernie's going to run away with it.
But, I mean, one of the things that's important in Iowa is ground game, and one would assume the Clintons know how to do the ground game in Iowa.
They do, but Bernie Sanders has got that young contingent going for him. He's got all of the motivated, energetic people. It's ironic. He's like the oldest guy in the race. I think he's maybe the oldest guy ever to run for president, but he's definitely got the young people with him. This whole Obama coalition that elected him in 2008, the young folks, they're not swinging to Clinton. They're swinging to Bernie, and that is what's going to make a difference for him.
One of the things I want you to – Larry and I have this ongoing discussion about whether or not the email server scandal and all of the investigations that are said to be going on at the FBI is having an impact on Hillary among Democrats. Larry doesn't think that's the case. I think it really is starting to bother Democrats.
I think it is, too, and it's one of those things that if you poll people on it in December, it matters not a whit what they tell you. But if you poll them 3 or 4 days before the caucuses or the primary that they're going to, and they actually start and do that gut check, that's definitely when you'll see an impact. And look, it doesn't really matter whether or not Hillary gets indicted. And you know, my sources inside the DOJ put it at about 1 chance in 3 that she gets indicted over something, or at least that there's a criminal referral from the FBI. It doesn't really matter whether any of that actually comes to fruition. What matters is whether or not people think it's important that they trust the President of the United States. Now, most of us have grown up with in a life where we've never actually trusted the President of the United States, but wouldn't it be a nice change? And I think Democrats, more than Republicans right now, are willing actually to say, well, it's not that important. As long as the person supports the values that I hold dear and will veto the bills that enrage me, maybe trust isn't that big a deal. After all, I mean, we survived Carter, we survived the first Clinton, we never trusted the first Bush, and we certainly hated the second one. So, you know, why is this new?
All right, David, thanks for joining us.
David.
Interesting. You know, his answer on both sides of the equation is it all depends on that young vote coming out.
Yeah.